Now, this artist, again, we're working with realism, but we're also working with stylization. It's a complex mix, and we're also working with pop aesthetics, which is definitely very, very strong. So the techniques that are being used by this particular painter, and we're dealing here with, forgive me, Matt, Bambo Sibiya, is basically, we're dealing with, you notice, a very, very thin finish. Again, there's no attempt to overcrowd. Here, it's dominant, but even here, the painting technique is thin in its choices. This is a very exciting phenomenon, and here, for example, I think it might be painted or raw canvas. Even if it is painted, it feels like it could be a raw canvas. But the key thing about this is that there's only so much need to occupy and control and dominate the surface, the performance, the material itself. But to manipulate it to the best of one's ability in an as expressive a way as possible. That's the key thing. Now, what's happening over here? Now, you might remember, from family albums, portraits. Family portraits. It's got that feel of an archive. That you've dug these things up and you found them, and then you wanted to rework them and create something beautifully contemporary with something that could be from the, let's say, 1940s. You know what I'm saying? It's got that feel, and even the dress sense and everything feels it's got that quality. So there's a certain kind of nostalgia and a certain kind of archaism, an old-fashioned quality to the way in which it's representing these women. It's a different ideal. It's an ideal of women from another era that's being played out. But what's happening is that he allows himself very, very much to stop allowing the iconic value to overpower the viewer. So you're not hit over the head with an absolutely strong, iconic, thing that dominates your gaze. Rather, it's a mood. It's the atmospheric quality of a history of womanhood that's played out and brought to the fore and given currency and dignity and beauty now. I think it's more that angle rather than some idealization of womanhood. I don't know what you think, but I mean, for me, this seems to be what's going on. If you look, for example, at these two figures over here, it's an entirely different energy field. I mean, this woman looks like a millennial. She's so now in the world. She's like literally circumspect, skeptically, healthily skeptical, open-minded in the world. Hey, saying, look, you don't think you know me or can control me. Whereas this one has a much more inner sense of an inner personal being. She's not trying to express herself publicly. She's not trying to engage the world. She has a stronger sense of her own personhood. So there's a contrasting set of personalities being played out in terms of the way they actually present themselves, their body language, their expression, the way they gaze, in her case, not at the viewer, in her case, directly at the viewer. So the tension is there, but what it actually does is what I said earlier on, right at the beginning when I said, it's so important when we deal with Black life and Black narratives, we do it with a sense of personality and feeling and truth that is depthful, not merely emboldening, not merely idealistic, but actually gives us a truth and a dignity in a way. And this is what Bambo Sibiya is able to do. So he's traversing two spaces. He's giving us the idea of an optimal dignity, but he's playing with the idea of the iconic, but he's not allowing the iconic to swallow up the individuality of the people that he's representing. This is a very difficult thing to do well. It's extremely difficult because it can be so easily just be an aspect of beauty and edification. He could easily just go that route, and he doesn't. He frees himself from that burden. Certainly in these two, definitely. And this work is in many ways a masterclass in terms of painting, because basically it tells us exactly how little you need to do to speak something of enormous potency. And of course here, the striking thing, there's another painting I see, how the blue just sort of, breaks out, whereas a much more complex arrangement of colors in this one. This is a much more minimalistic palette, but which allows that the blue sapphire to just explode. But again, what's interesting about the figure here, the sense, it's the way the neck is held, the way the body is held, the sense of posture. Basically, the person's looking at you, they have a sense of their own personhood, but you also feel this person not looking at you from a position of arrogance or a position of control. There's an implicit vulnerability in that face, but that vulnerability is not negative. That vulnerability is human. For me, basically, so you can have sad stories built into it, but what you connect with you, it's the sadness you want to go to and say, can I help you? As opposed to sadness and you go, I don't think I want to go there. What I'm saying is basically, so there's a certain inviting quality to the work and a calming quality and an easeful and a very beautiful, beautiful, beautiful work. That both of these play out that technique very, very well. This one I think exceptionally so, especially now, in this very, very complicated time. I'm sorry to bring up the registration again, because next year is a major year. Just try and hold on to this image. If you want to think about a nation you want to live in a space that actually embodies a sense of well-being, but also of struggle, the complexity of it, in a subtle, very, very, very beautifully engineered and humane way, this work becomes perfectly iconic of the kind of future that I want to live in this country, a world where there's enough dignity, but also historical burden, but also a great sense of grace and a great sense of empathy and understanding. That emotional space is played out in these two sets of works extremely well. This one is very different because this one's much more strongly iconic, and it's very much more about a stylization of a particular moment in history. That woman is incredibly current. Okay, in contrast to the woman and the woman behind you. It's a very different storyline, so that's being played out. So for me, that work works much more in terms of pop iconography, but without the greater, it's about empowerment, it's about stylization, yes, but I'm not wholly convinced it achieves psychologically the depth that this one and this one achieves in terms of trying to communicate to us, just the complexity of living and being. For me personally, it's overshadowed by stylization, which, by the way, there's a major essay by Achille Mbembe on African self-writing, which is about African stylization. If you're interested, if you like reading very sharp, brilliant minds, he's probably one of the sharpest in Joburg, let alone on the continent. Achille Mbembe.